Okay, in this video we're going to talk a little bit on battlefield prep. We're in springtime, it's planting time now. So you need to be thinking about prepping your battlefields. Now this is something I had heard about that is done by some of the older militias across the country. When springtime comes around, they start planting inside their anticipated areas of operations different type of vegetation to get it growing now, so that something were to occur, they'll have a self-sustaining food source. Now ideally you're looking for things that require little to no maintenance, preferably the no maintenance. You're looking for perennial plants, not annuals, ones that are going to come up every year, not just the one time and then they're done. I have on there 4 likely areas for you to think about. The first off is your fruit trees and bushes. Examples for this would obviously be your pear trees, your apple trees, blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, strawberries, you know, your wild fruits. Next up would be your nut trees, like your walnuts, your pecans and such. Then after that is perennial vegetables. On that I'm thinking kind of like your onions, your garlics, you know, potentially mushrooms. There's different plants that I know grow wild around military bases that as the troops would recognize them, they would pick them. And things like wild onions was something that was kind of sought after. People would find those and add them into their MREs. Or they would eat them raw, just clean them up with a little bit of water from their canteens. And last is your wild edibles. So you're looking at, like, you know, your cattails, your wild mushrooms, and wild rice and other plants. Now when you would plant this stuff, you want to make it look as natural as possible. You're going to plant it in smaller patches, but you're going to do multiple patches in the area. With your fruit trees and that, like your pear and your apple, maybe you'd be able to get away with doing clusters of them, so that maybe they'll look like a overgrown orchard if an enemy force would move through the area. And your fruit bushes, well, in my area they pretty much grow wherever in the woods, so increasing the number of batches of them all over the place would not draw as much attention. Same with your nut trees. You know, they basically get planted by squirrels every year, so who's going to notice if there's a few other new ones? Now, with your trees, bushes, shrubs that you're putting in, you're probably going to have to do a little bit of tending on them in the beginning until their roots have spread out enough and they're self-sustaining. So you're probably going to have to plant them in a location that you're going to be able to get to with maybe a 5-gallon water jug, or a cart with 5-gallon water jugs or 5-gallon buckets of water with lids on it so that you can water them for the first few weeks. And then especially the first couple years, you'll want to go out and check on them, see how well they're doing. After that, I'd say plan on checking on them once or twice a year, just to go in and see, are they still alive and that stuff. Is there other vegetation that's starting to crowd over towards it that could potentially kill it off later, that you need to pull or cut back by hand a little bit to allow that food source to continue growing. So the wild edibles, the wild rice, cattails, and that type of stuff. And there's other plants. These are just ones that I could think of pretty quick that I hear mentioned a lot. basically you're going to areas where this stuff already grows naturally, and you're just adding more to it so that more of it is growing in that area. So mushrooms, something that I've heard on that, and this was recommended by our Department of Natural Resources here a few years ago, is the mushroom populations were going down in my area because of over-harvesting. And they recommended that when people get the mushrooms and they go through and they clean them, that they would soak them for a certain amount of time, get them to release their spores, their seeds and that stuff into the water, and then shake them off inside the water to clean off more of the seeds down into the bottom of the bowl. And then they asked people to take those seeds and spread them around where they got the mushrooms from, so that that following year there would be more growing in that area. Otherwise, people were coming through and they were literally stripping areas of all the mushrooms, especially ones that had not released their seeds yet, and it was literally wiping them out. There was areas where there used to be large amounts of mushrooms, nothing grows in at all now, except other vegetation. There are no more mushrooms left. So if you go wild mushroom hunting, look up on that, see what you should do, and when you go through and clean them in that, take those seeds that are left in the water afterwards, put them out in the same areas. If that particular type of mushroom grows on a particular type of log or a particular type of rotting matter, spread the seeds around in that area and put it in a few different locations so that maybe it'll grow in multiple spots. I think I mentioned try to make this stuff blend in as much as possible so that it looks like it's wild stuff now, stuff that had been planted years before but has been left unattended and it's just grown on its own. Now, as the stuff grows over time here, you can go in and harvest from that. Okay? So if the war doesn't happen, and we're getting it 5 years, 10 years, the stuff's been in the ground, it's still producing, it's spreading and that stuff, well, go in there and harvest some. You have some nuts, some fruits and that stuff, and vegetables and whatever that's available. Go in, harvest it, process it, and add it to your stuff at home. Just don't strip the plants completely, because you never know. You might end up that following week to have to deploy to the field and go to war. So just leave a little bit of it behind. Make sure that enough is left behind to keep the plot sustainable and possibly growing. So I know with apple trees, in order to make sure that they produce enough or continue producing enough, you're supposed to prune them at a certain time in the year. Maybe plan on doing that. Every other year or something with the apple trees, go through and hand prune them so that they'll keep producing a good amount. When you do your checks on the plants, have a little strip map written up showing where these different plots, these different plants, bushes and trees have been planted. Have written in the notes what was planted there and when it was planted, and if there's any specialty care instructions or something like that a person needs to look for that year's inspection, that's written there. And then you just go off the map. You go through, you check this spot, then you go over to the next one, check that spot, and you go through and you check each one. Make sure everything is still going, nothing's died off. If it has died off, maybe try to determine why. Did someone come through and cut it down? Did a tree fall over and crush it? Did it die because it wasn't getting enough water? Or did wildlife come through and chew it down? and then adjust accordingly. So get out there right now and start planting some of this edible vegetation inside your area of operations. Here in about another month, you're going to see a lot of the garden centers are going to be winding down, and they always have trees and bushes left at the end. Get some of those trees and bushes, plant them. Wherever you plant the stuff, try to make sure that it's accessible to you, that you're going to be able to get in there with at least a game cart, with a few tools, buckets of water and stuff like that, so that you can help it along in the beginning. That you'll be able to go in, you'll be able to water it every other day or every day, whatever's required when that particular plant gets put in the ground. And then as time goes on, you stretch, farther and farther away, adding to it, going deeper into the woods, deeper into the mountains, that type of thing. Now, for all my engineer brothers in the Patriot and Militia movements, always remember, essayons.